go ahead with the introducing the next speaker and next session. And on behalf of the Perindalmana ONG Society, we express our sincere thanks to Suresh sir for being with us. And thank you so much, sir, for that wonderful talk and wonderful session on behalf of all of us.
So the next speaker is Dr. Sanish. He will be discussing about preventive strategies in the women at risk and use of aspirin. Dr. Sanish is a consultant, fetal medicine consultant working at ARMC Perindalmana. He has done his fellowship from University of Barcelona, master's degree in maternal fetal medicine from University of Barcelona and Pereggio, Italy. And he has trained around 100 doctors in FOXI certified basic ultrasound course, and they even run a fellowship program. He has around 18 publications in national and international journals. Over to you, Dr. Sanish.
So I think I'm audible here. So
yes,
I'm audible, sir?
Okay. Audible.
Please. Thank you. So first of all, at the outset, I would profusely thank Professor Suresh for providing the latest insight on screening for preeclampsia, especially in the first trimester, and answering all those queries. Now, the next session is on what after screening. Now, from Sir's session, we already have seen that after a combined multi-marker screening, there will be actually two groups of women. One would be the low risk and one would be the high risk. Now, the low risk woman would have a routine antenatal care pathway, whereas a high risk woman would require aspirin and some other interventions from the maternal fetal perspective. Now, instead of a routine lecture where all the theoretical aspects of aspirin and other management things are covered, instead I've gone to a question answer sessions where I've included the most common queries and scenarios, especially from the obstetricians of our area and those who have come training regarding preeclampsia. Now, let me start with the most basic question here. What are the indications for aspirin during pregnancy? Now, just like your progesterone, aspirin is one of the most misused drugs ever, right? For n number of indication, aspirin is being prescribed to all the women. And we are not even knowing whether those women are following or taking those drugs and whether they have a solid indication for starting aspirin in them. So I thought I'll start with the most simplest slide here, the indications for aspirin during pregnancy. And actually it is the thinnest slide ever. Now there are only 4 indications for aspirin in pregnancy. One is preeclampsia, prevention of preeclampsia in the high risk woman. Now the high risk could be either following a proper combined multi-marker screening or just based on uterine artery Doppler or using one of the guidelines from NICE or ACOG where risk factors from a previous pregnancy are taken into consideration, which Sir has described beautifully. The second indication, again, from a preventive aspect is obstetric antiphospholipid syndrome, where traditionally we were using 75 milligram, but from the insight into the dosage of aspirin and its role in preventing preeclampsia, now everyone has shifted to 150 milligram. Besides this, there are only 2 therapeutic roles of aspirin in pregnancy. One is in a woman with a thromboembolic state and woman with some cardiac morbidity. So in fact, these 4 are the only indications for using aspirin in pregnancy. Now coming to our core area, preeclampsia. So how does aspirin, I mean, is the role of aspirin proven in preeclampsia? What kind of evidence do we have in this regard? Now, we all know from our health education and medical literature that the highest level of evidence for any intervention is a high quality randomized controlled trial or a well-performed meta-analysis. And aspirin is one of the few things in obstetrics which has evidence in both these aspects. So there's a beautiful randomized controlled trial in the form of aspirin trial. And then there is a meta-analysis which followed that, which clearly proved that aspirin has a beneficial role in preeclampsia. Therefore, one needs to look no further in this. In fact, the aspirin trial which was actually a placebo-controlled double-blinded study, was performed in the most apt manner. And based on the randomization and more than 80% adherence to aspirin, it was noted that there was significant reduction in very early preeclampsia developing before 32 weeks, early developing before 34 weeks, and the preterm preeclampsia developing before 37 weeks. And overall, there was a significant reduction in the incidence of all the early preeclampsias. So this pictorial diagram is from the ASPRE trial. The evidence was so robust that the highest professional society in ultrasound, namely ISCOG, and the highest professional society in women's health, namely FIGO, have both endorsed the screening for women with uterine artery Doppler and other markers based on resources available for screening and prevention of preeclampsia. Now the question is, how does aspirin act? Now, whenever we interact with obstetricians, we find that most of the obstetricians are thinking that aspirin acts by preventing by its anticoagulant action, that is by preventing thrombosis. And for the same reason, they're also adding heparin to the woman in the first trimester and then stopping the treatment somewhere between 12 to 14 weeks. It is to their surprise that antithrombotic action is only a minor action of aspirin. It has much other roles to play, which I will be telling in the subsequent slides. So this is a pictorial representation of what happens ultimately in preeclampsia. So there is a deranged placentation, and there is a derangement of the prostaglandins, cytokines, the SFLT1 level increases compared to TLGF. And finally, there's a pathway which is guided by endothelin-1, which results in all the clinical manifestation. Remember, this all happens in women who are genetically predisposed to develop preeclampsia, as was shown by the GWAS study. Now, 3 levels these insults can happen. They can happen at the level of the biochemical markers, vasculature, and ultimately also affect the maternal cardiovascular system. Now, the action of aspirin can be beautifully depicted by thinking in a very simple manner. Just think of 2 cells and 2 prostaglandins. Now, there are the endothelial cells which produce all kinds of prostaglandins, but the principal prostaglandin it produces is PGI2. Platelets, however, is capable of producing only thromboxane A2. So at the recommended doses from the randomized controlled trial and the meta-analysis, that is namely 150 milligram, aspirin preferentially acts on the platelets, reducing the level of thromboxane A2. However, the endothelial cells, because they have nucleus, they continue producing prostaglandin I2. Now, prostaglandin I2 is a good prostaglandin, whereas thromboxane A2 is a vasoconstrictor one. It is a bad prostaglandin. Ultimately, what happens is the level of prostaglandin I2 is much higher level than thromboxane A2, and this promotes neovasculogenesis, angiogenesis, superior cytokine profile. And there is a dose-dependent reduction in the level of SFLT1. Now, SFLT1 is one hormone or one cytokine that promotes or that prevents neovasculogenesis and promotes the development of abnormal placentation-related disorders. And finally, it also has an antithrombotic action. So to summarize, aspirin prevents development of deep placental lesions. It preserves the greatest event that happens in the myometrium in the second trimester, transformation of spiral arterioles into insensitive, that is vascular channels, which are insensitive to endothelin-1 and other agents. It increases the production of the good cytokine TLGF, which again promotes angiogenesis and placentation. It reduces apoptosis and improves cytokine profile. And as I already mentioned, it has got a minor antithrombotic action. So due to these cumulative actions, aspirin prevents the development of early preeclampsia. Coming to the most favorite question, what is the dosage of aspirin? Now, if you see most of the referral sheets and the prescriptions around, we find that 75 milligram continues to be the favorite dose of at least 50% obstetricians. Now, sadly, this is because of some roles played by the professional society, which all came with a non-uniform doses as evident in this slide. And then some pharma companies which brought about tablets of 75 milligram and 81 milligram and their promotion. So somewhere the dosage of 150 milligram was forgotten. Now, for the effective prevention of preeclampsia, just remember there are 2 doses you need to consider. One is 150 milligram for a woman who weighs more than 45 kg, And most of the women in our outpatient department and antenatal clinics belong to this category. There'll be a small group of women who have one of the risk factors and or are screen positive but weigh less than 45 kg. In them, one can use 100 milligram. In fact, low dose aspirin means dosage less than 300 milligram. And what has actually been recommended from the studies is half of the low dose, the threshold for the low dose aspirin. Now, coming to the next question, and we have seen that when most of the women declare that the urinary pregnancy test is positive, they're already started with aspirin. Similarly, women who have one or more risk factors, they also start aspirin from the early pregnancy itself. And then we have seen that in some pregnancies, the aspirin dose is stopped at 12 weeks, 20 weeks, sometimes 32 weeks. So there are no clear cutoffs available to the obstetricians as to when to start and when to stop. Now, remember this simple point here, start aspirin at least before 16 weeks. Because after 16 weeks, and especially after 20 weeks, there is very little or negligible or absolutely no effect of aspirin as has been shown by various studies. So if at all you are starting aspirin for the welfare of the woman to improve placentation, prevent placental related disorders, start at least before 16 weeks. Now, a meta-analysis that was done in 2020 led by Kema Sath Hong showed that starting aspirin before 11 weeks has no benefits. So if you're starting aspirin just from the moment of conception, remember there is no benefit. And even from the physiology, so from the pathophysiology, you know that the major event in placentation is the transformation of the spiral arterioles into large vasomotor channels that is actually happening between 16 to 20 weeks. Therefore, all the physiological processes necessary for that would be happening a month or two before that. Hence, starting aspirin before 11 weeks, if you talk about evidence, has no benefits. And then someone may ask why after 16 weeks, the aspirin is not useful if at all the transformation of the spiral arterioles is happening between 16 to 20 weeks. Remember, though the transformation is happening between 16 to 20 weeks, the necessary cytokine profile and the hormonal milieu necessary for it is happening a month before that. After 16 weeks, the placental vascular development shifts from proliferation to remodeling. And aspirin has actually no role in vascular remodeling. It only I have shown you the different action. It promotes proliferation, that is angiogenesis or neovasculogenesis. But in remodeling of the vessels, it has no role. And for the curious few who still want to start aspirin before 11 weeks, this is one drug for which there is no FDA class. So teratogenicity of this drug is not known or has not been reported yet. Now, when to stop aspirin? Now, if a woman is screen positive based on the protocol Professor Suresh has elucidated, stop aspirin only in 3 indications. Once the woman has reached 36 weeks with no complication, or anytime before 36 weeks, if the woman has developed preeclampsia, after which there is no role of aspirin, or there has been an indication for delivery such as PPROM or preterm birth or severe preeclampsia requiring delivery before 36 weeks. Now, if you're starting aspirin, see that the woman adheres to aspirin till 36 weeks or these endpoints, and don't stop aspirin therapy before that. Now, for the curious few of who want to know what is the role of aspirin in 3rd trimester, like other non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, there is no action of aspirin on premature closure of the arterial duct. Also, there is, unlike what is much thought of, there is no excess of hemorrhagic neonatal complications when used in screen women. In fact, one of the reasons for stopping after 36 weeks is that after this period, the risk of neonatal bleeding slightly increases compared to when one uses before 36 weeks. So from these slides, one must be now confident as to when to start aspirin. Start aspirin once you have done the early target scan at 11 to 13 plus 6 weeks with uterine artery Doppler. And if possible, you have done a multimodal marker screening and you now feel that the woman requires aspirin. Start from that point and continue till 36 weeks or one of the events has happened, namely development of preeclampsia or an early delivery. Now, another thing that we have seen for all the obstetricians who are listening to this is most of you are prescribing aspirin in the noon time, because we think that that is the time when the woman is going to have food And by taking that time, the acidic profile is not disturbed by taking aspirin, etc. But let me tell you, the raw aspirin should be prescribed just before the bedtime, because multiple studies, especially from Ayala et al., has shown that aspirin has a diurnal action, and its action is significant when it is taken 8 hours before, after awakening, especially at the bedtime. So it was based on this study and some other corroborative studies that aspirin was prescribed in the night time in the randomized controlled trial from Fetal Medicine Foundation, the ASPIRATE trial. So aspirin to be prescribed at the night time. Now, is it just the preeclampsia, or are there additional benefits of using aspirin? This is a very valid question. And thankfully, there is additional role of aspirin in preventing fetal growth restriction, premature birth, perinatal death. But here comes the confusing thing. Whether it prevents development of these complications in the context of absence of preeclampsia is questionable. So it would reduce all these complications if they are related to the same pathophysiology that has led to the development of preeclampsia. So in a woman who does not have preeclampsia, does it prevent fetal growth restriction, preterm delivery, or perinatal death is actually questionable. Now, in the women who are screen positive for aspirin and still have developed other complications such as preterm birth or even preeclampsia, it was shown that if the woman had strongly adhered to aspirin, there was a significant reduction in the admission of the neonates to the NICU facilities. So even if the complications develop, they are milder. And not only that, certain neonatal complications are also prevented, and as is seen from the secondary analysis from the ASPIRATE trial. This shows, this has already been talked about by Suresh sir. This shows how much is the cumulative action of aspirin in preventing the various kinds of preeclampsia, the very early, the preterm, and all preeclampsias. So we find that the most dangerous phenotype of preeclampsia that has the greatest association with eclampsia and HELLP syndrome, that is the early preeclampsia, is the most significantly reduced by judicious, prompt, and continuous adherence to the initiation and maintenance of aspirin. Now this is again question, and I think somebody had asked from the audience. Women who had a preeclampsia in previous pregnancies, or say they have some other risk factors based on several guidelines, can one prescribe aspirin directly to them, or do they need a screening? Now, this is a wonderful analysis again from the ASPIRATE trial, the secondary analysis of ASPIRATE trial. Now, let me explain this table for you. So you have the authors have divided the population, the obstetric population, into two groups. One, those who were screen positive just based on the NICE criteria. Secondly, the women who were FMF, who were positive after the multi-marker screening that was performed between 11 to 36 weeks. That is what is shown by the FMF positive. Now look at the second row. Women who were NICE positive, that is, who had one of the major complications in their previous pregnancies, but were screen negative in multi-marker screening done in this early first trimester, had a significant reduction of the relative risk of developing preeclampsia in them. So what this shows effectively translates to clinical practices. We might have already seen in our obstetric practice that there are some women who develop preeclampsia in a pregnancy, whereas in the next second and third pregnancy, they may not be developing preeclampsia. So in such situations, it is always advisable that one can at least try offering the full multi-marker screening between 11 to 13 plus 6 weeks. And those who are screen negative, avoid aspirin, or at least avoid heparin administration in them. So that is what this secondary analysis from the ASPIRATE trial shows regarding women with a previous history of preeclampsia or other risk factors. Not only this is also a secondary analysis done from the ASPIRATE trial and published in AGOG. Now this is a forest plot which shows the relative risks in different women. Now let me again make this figure simplified for you. So what this again showed here is aspirin had the greatest effect in screen positive women who had a significant risk factor from the previous pregnancy. For example, consider a woman who is screen positive and who is also smoking. So in them, the relative risk of developing preeclampsia by the administration of aspirin was less compared to the placebo, which is this, right? So similarly, when there was a history of chronic hypertension in the previous pregnancy, and all types of hypertension were taken into consideration. Again, by the use of aspirin, the relative risk of developing preeclampsia was reduced by the administration of aspirin judiciously with proper adherence. Now, coming to the question, is aspirin a safe drug? Are there any adverse effects to it that one should know? Yes. Now, we all know that the principal action of aspirin is on platelets. Therefore, at least theoretically, it might increase the gastrointestinal bleed or cerebral bleed. Now, that means there is an increase in the absolute risk compared to the placebo when one uses aspirin. But when one goes deep into the figures, one finds that the risk difference that is of using of aspirin is actually very, very less, right? Even in the women who are not taking aspirin, the risk of bleeding is already very less. But by using aspirin, the increase in the events of bleeding is just by 2.2 to around 2, right, per 1,000. So 2 per 1,000. That is an increase in use of aspirin. Increase in gastrointestinal or cerebral bleeds with the use of aspirin. Now, this can be significantly reduced if one uses selectively aspirin only in the screen positive woman, right? So if only used in screen positive woman, all this relative risk can be further reduced. And in women who have got minor bleeding, it is pretty much safe to continue aspirin. In fact, again, as I will show, yes, from this figure, again, this is a forest plot, and the incidence of placental abruption in women who had no aspirin versus aspirin. And let me again make this simple for you. So you will see that when aspirin was started before 16 weeks, at a dosage of at least more than 100 milligrams, the incidence of abruption is actually less compared to the control. So forget about occurrence of minor vaginal bleeding when you are offering aspirin. The incidence of vaginal bleeding is actually less when you're correctly using aspirin, as is shown in the secondary analysis, in the meta-analysis of the effective use of aspirin, right? But again, when you see that if you start aspirin after 16 weeks, and whether at the doses, the suboptimal doses or the proper doses, the risk of abruption is actually increasing. So all this actually warrants for screening all women between 11 to 13 plus 6 weeks with uterine artery Doppler and additional parameters, which is available from your resources. So comes this big question: should aspirin be prescribed for everyone then? Because it is a cheap drug. It is so much effective. Why not avoid screening, which is expensive, and prescribe aspirin for all the women? Now, aspirin, just like your antibiotics, but through a different mechanism, is prone to develop resistance in its action, right? And if you see, when aspirin is prescribed universally, the resistance develops in almost 1/3 of the women. Therefore, even if you are offering aspirin in them, 1/3 of them is not going to have the beneficial effect. On the other hand, the incidence in women only for the, women on aspirin only for high-risk indications is just 5%. Similarly, you might have noticed from your practice, if you blindly give a medicine to everyone, after you're just as they come off the out of the OP, they will ask, okay, is this medicine even necessary? Oh, this is cheap. It might not be even useful. Why should I start it, right? So the adherence would be actually very less if you are prescribing universally, whereas adherence would be much better if you tell the woman, look, you are screen positive. This is a risk of developing preeclampsia. This much cases can be prevented, and you need to take aspirin till this point, right? Similarly, the incidence of, already we have seen that the abruption and minor vaginal bleeds are actually in women who are on aspirin because of high-risk factors. So all this actually means that aspirin should be prescribed only for women with a risk factor if you're not able to do a screening, or if at all you are able to do a screening for those who are screen positive, at least uterine artery PI greater than 95th centile, or if you're in a well-equipped setup, if you are able to offer a multi-marker screening, as we are actually doing in our hospital. And similarly, again, a secondary analysis from the ASPIRE trial showed that when the adherence was more than 90%, the reduction of adverse complications was much higher than the woman where there was the adherence was actually less. So from the all the women who got aspirin, when a small group was taken who had actually taken aspirin for more than 90% of the duration, the reduction in complications was actually much more less in them. So as is shown by this figure again. Now, so all this, the aforementioned slides clearly show when to start aspirin, whom to start aspirin, till what point to be continued, and also in whom not to start aspirin, right? And I have already provided the necessary evidence for all the details. Now, coming to the question which was asked by some delegates, is calcium required? Is heparin required, or any other interventions required? Is aspirin the only intervention in screen positive women? Now, remember, calcium trials on calcium has shown no beneficial effects, but they have shown the beneficial effect of calcium on a minority or in a small group of women who had serum calcium levels low. Okay, so in women who were on low calcium, optimize the calcium intake and see that they at least receive 1.2 to 1.6 gram elemental iron per day. Not only that, all screen positive women should be supervised by a high risk obstetric unit. They require the fetal scans between 28, 32, and 36 weeks with biometry and Dopplers. And whatever complication develop should be diagnosed early, and appropriate treatments such as antihypertensives should be utilized. So it is not just the aspirin, but all this optimization of calcium intake, proper supervision of the mother and the fetus should be done once you have a screen positive woman from your uterine artery Doppler or multi-marker screening. Now, somebody had asked, if a woman is already on aspirin, will it impact screening? Now, if a woman is already on 75 milligram, and I think Suresh sir has also mentioned this is just a repetition for people who have logged in late. So if a woman is on suboptimal dose of aspirin, anyway, it's not going to prevent the serious placental abnormal placentation related disorders. And therefore, the woman can be still offered screening. And if the screen is negative, one can stop giving aspirin. And if she is screen positive, one can escalate the dose from 75 milligram to 150 milligram. And again, this question was answered. Is there a risk of vaginal bleeding at the high dose? So again, the randomized control trial, the aspirin has shown that the incidence of vaginal bleeding was actually less in women who were started on aspirin based on solid indications. Now, this is a very common scenario in our departments. If a woman has had a preeclampsia, especially a preterm preeclampsia in the previous pregnancy, is now screen negative, should we start aspirin? Now, that depends on how much you are adhering to evidence-based medicine. Ideally, the answer is no, because we have already seen the comparison between the NICE study and the aspirin and the FMF positive, that figure, where we saw that if FMF negative, then the actually incidence of developing preeclampsia in them is less. But again, depending upon your individual discretions and decisions, you might start aspirin, and that is ultimately left to you. Does low molecular weight heparin have a role? Now, perhaps I've left the most controversial things towards the end here. Now, the problem with low molecular weight heparin is it has shown positive effects in all these trials. Some of these are actually randomized controlled trials, whereas in some of the later studies, especially in 2016, it has shown no benefits. Again, when you go to meta-analysis, these studies have shown that there is a positive impact, whereas again, some of the later meta-analysis has shown that there is no beneficial effect. Now, the answer to this question is yes. There is a small group of women which we cannot define, where we don't know how to define them, that might actually benefit by the use of aspirin in preventing preeclampsia and even with the related disorders. But how to define the woman, what are their selection criteria is not known, and thus we are awaiting a well-conducted future trial in the beginning. And since heparin is such an expensive drug, especially unfractionated heparin, which requires frequent monitoring and which has so many adverse maternal neonatal adverse effects, as of now, one can say that perhaps it's better not to start heparin and to rely on aspirin and other adjunct measures in preventing preeclampsia. Right? So it is not that it doesn't have a role; it does have a role, but we still don't know who are those women that benefit by the judicious use of even low molecular weight heparin. And now, just note the point that we're not even taking the unfractionated heparin into consideration. Now, what if a woman presents after 14 weeks? And again, Suresh sir has told you that. So you cannot do a multi-marker screening. Remember, all screening should be finished by 13 plus 6 weeks. So if a woman presents after that, you do like what you do for the Down syndrome screening. Just based on the presence of risk factors, you can start aspirin. But again, when you start aspirin, start at the proper dose, start at the proper time, and see that the woman is adhering to it, and use the endpoints that we had described in the previous slide. Now, what is the future of prevention of, are there any pharmacological agents that are on the way? Now, pravastatin was studied a lot in many trials, and the only double-blinded multi-center placebo RCT that was published in the year 2018 in BGOG showed that there was no significant difference in SFLT1 concentration or the ratio of associated SFLT1 with PLGF in women who took pravastatin. But the authors don't conclude that it is not useful, whether it was due to a suboptimal dose, as actually happened with aspirin, because in the initial phase of aspirin, all the studies were done with 75 milligram, and they showed a very minuscule beneficial effect. So whether it is due to a suboptimal dose, or actually if pravastatin doesn't have a role in preventing preeclampsia, is a question that needs to be answered in a better study in the future. Now, 2-3 other trials are on the way. There is a trial that has started in 2019 by the US NICHD, that is a UNICEF Center for Child Health and Development, who are studying preeclampsia, the use of pravastatin 20 milligram in daily in women. But sadly, I must say that they are using only one criteria, that is the presence of severe preeclampsia in the previous pregnancy, if the preeclampsia had developed before 34 weeks. Another study that is being done by the Hamad Medical Corporation, and that has started this year, is that they have combined metformin 1 gram with aspirin 100 milligram in women who are screen positive based on ACOG criteria. And this trial has just started. So maybe in the coming years, it would come up with a result. And the Fetal Medicine Foundation UK has started their next trial, where they are studying pravastatin for preventing the third term, the late third trimester preeclampsia. And if at all it has a beneficial effect, it might reduce all those cases of late, eclampsia developing, as Professor Piley had said, eclampsia developing because of late onset of preeclampsia. So with this, I go on to not take home messages, take to your practice messages, because you take messages to home and then you come back to your practice with the old points. So these are the points that you must carry to your practice from tomorrow onwards. So offer any kind of screening for preeclampsia in the first trimester. If you're in a low resource setting, you use at least a mean arterial pressure, because the instruments are cheap and widely available. You note down the demographic factors in them. If you're a well-equipped setup, you can go for a combined multi-marker screening. And as Professor Suresh sir has said, preeclampsia is much more a condition, a condition which much more requires screening than Down syndrome. Women who are screen positive, start them on aspirin, start at least before 16 weeks, right? Dosage, don't forget, there are only 2 doses, 150 milligram and 100 milligram. 150 milligram, almost for more than 90% of your women who weigh 45 kg, and 100 milligram for the exceptional few who mind their body, right? And dosage, nighttime. There is absolutely no confusion regarding that. And see that the woman adheres to the usage of aspirin till the endpoints, that is 36 weeks, or if the preeclampsia has developed in them, or in deliveries happen. So if preeclampsia is developed, stop aspirin, because after that there is no beneficial effect. In fact, there might be a harmful effect if the woman develops any other thrombotic complication, bleeding complications in them. And universal administration has no benefits, but has actually more harmful effects than prescribing in only the screen positive. And right now, these are the societies which have approved for screening women for preeclampsia and starting aspirin and other measures. But the real professional societies are still lagging. And we know the story from the Down syndrome, though everything was proven by 2000s or 2002, RCOG was too late by a factor of 10 years to incorporate these guidelines. So don't wait for this professional societies to bring out the guidelines for the screening women. The evidence is already there and it is quite robust. So start screening your woman for preeclampsia from tomorrow onwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sanish, for the in-depth discussion on aspirin and especially the practice points. Now we'll go directly to the Q&A session, which will be moderated by Dr. Jyoti Mancheri. To introduce Jyoti ma'am, Madam works as a fetal medicine consultant in Calicut. Ma'am completed her fellowship in fetal medicine at Royal Prince Alfred Hospital and is also a fellow of Royal Australian and New Zealand College of Obstetrics and Gynecology. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Rimshi, for the kind introduction. And thank you very much, Dr. Sanish, Dr. Kunjamoideen, and Dr. Wahab for the kind invitation. So before we waste time, I think we'll move on to the questions if you have to ask the questions.
Yeah.
And again, thank you for organizing such a wonderful event on a special day for every obstetrician. So looking forward to listen to your questions.
So
Dr. Rinshi, you can start with some questions.
Which is better for first trimester uterine artery Doppler, a transabdominal or transvaginal scan screening?
Okay, so there is no right or wrong answer here, but when we think about the screening program, it's always better to find a way which is easier for everybody. And because of that, we have uterine artery PI mainly done on abdominal scan in most of the trials. But if you can't get it on abdominal scan, if you take a transvaginal scan, that's also fine, but the cutoff value is going to be different.
And we have specific charts for transvaginal and transabdominal scan.
So, Jyoti ma'am, there is a question here, especially for sonologists, radiographers, and gynecologists who are doing scan at the periphery. They don't have an access to a reporting software. They don't have maybe the internet connections. So, is there can we use a single cutoff in the first trimester where we know that the uterine artery Doppler is resistant or not?
I mean, it may not be as accurate as the one which we use as nomogram, but roughly we say 2.35 is the cutoff in the first trimester for a transabdominal scan, and around 3.1 for transvaginal scan. If they're doing it at 20 weeks, it will come down to 1.4, 1.5.
Okay. So even I think ICOG in their 2018 guidelines have told that if you don't have access, use a cutoff of 2.35. Remember that figure, 2.35 as your uterine artery cutoff. This thing. So there is another question here. The question is that is uterine artery notching important, or should one go for a pulsatility index? Now this is a notch looks very beautiful. It is deep and it has got its own curves. So everybody is obsessed with it. Should one go for a notch or maybe a PI, which is better?
PI is definitely better than notch. Notch does tell us that there is going to be some problem with the vascularity, but as of now, pulsatility index does look at it as well.
Ma'am, there's a question. Yeah. What if we start aspirin empirically 150? Does it affect screening?
I think Sanish has already answered that question, haven't you?
When I answered, it was like 75 milligram, and it was shown that starting 75 milligram anyway is not going to have beneficial effect in even screen positive women. But 150 milligram, as of now, we can say that no evidence in our hands on its impact.
Yeah, we haven't got any evidence, but having said that, if a lady is on 150 milligram aspirin, I wouldn't be doing the screening because the purpose is to put them on aspirin before 16 weeks anyway.
So this might be especially important for, say, in rural setups and peripheries where a woman may not turn up for their NT scan, right? The adherence to NT scan is very less, and the woman comes with a booking scan and straight away comes at 24 weeks. So maybe that is one scenario where we anyway start asking if there is a preeclampsia or any risk factors in the previous pregnancy.
There's another question with respect to screening in twins, wherein Suresh sir said that they anyway have a high risk of developing preeclampsia. The question was, is aspirin when given to twin, can aspirin be given to twins irrespective of the uterine artery PI?
Yes, some of the bodies are recommending that multiple pregnancy can be started on low-dose aspirin straight away. The incidence of preeclampsia is quite high in multiple pregnancy.
So I think during my brief stay at Barcelona, Fetal Medicine Barcelona, and we had asked the same question to Francis Figueras. So he said multifetal pregnancy, anyway, the risk of developing preeclampsia in them is much higher. So one can straight away start aspirin for such women. I mean, he considers that as only indication where screening may be avoided, and one can start aspirin straight away.
Ma'am, another question is, if first trimester preeclampsia screening is low risk and at 16 weeks you get a high resistance in uterine artery Doppler, do we have to start aspirin?
It's debatable. Like if you had a proper full-fledged screening for preeclampsia, you probably don't have to. But having said that, whenever you start aspirin, all you have to think about is the number needed to treat. So if you can actually talk to the patient and say that, look, your uterine artery is showing slight difference. So if you want, you can follow that up in 20 weeks and see whether it's increasing and start with aspirin, or straight away start aspirin. It's not, I don't think it is, there is a right and wrong answer for that.
One thing I want to add here to the same scenario is that abnormal uterine artery, defined as elevated PI, is not just due to abnormal placentation. I mean, there are other mechanisms for the same, such as an abnormal cardiovascular profile or hemodynamic status in the mother, which can develop due to other reasons. And we already know there is a cardiac theory for preeclampsia as well, independent of placentation. Therefore, the woman can develop a resistant uterine artery due to other reasons, even if the uterine artery was normal in the first trimester. So at least increased maternal fetal surveillance is necessary in them. If not, you are starting aspirin.
There's a compliment by Piley sir. He says, very good talk, Sanish, thank you. Do you offer multimodal screening in your practice? If so, what is the cost?
Sir, I think you can inform Kerala government. We have completely shifted to first trimester quad test for all our women in the first trimester. So all the women who come to us, the nurse takes a detailed history on a pro forma, and all the factors that are necessary for screening are taken. And then I've got a reporting software, which is from the Astraya, and that Dr. Jyoti is also using. And we perform the uterine artery strictly as per the guidelines. And if we offer a first trimester quad test in them to all of the women. So what we noted is when we shifted from a double marker to a first trimester quad test, incorporating 4 markers and preeclampsia screening, there was absolutely no questions from anyone. I mean, the people just added to it. But yes, once ours is a boutique hospital, once you go to less equipped and less resource centers, it might be very difficult to explain to the patient the costs and everything. In general, the existing market prices from the laboratory side for a double marker test is around 1,200. And if you add PLGF to it, there is an extra 300 to 400 rupees. And that is, it comes around 1,500 to 1,600. And the first trimester quad test, it comes around 1,600 to 2,000 rupees as offered by various labs. So this is just the laboratory costs. To that, you have to add the ultrasound costs and other things. So yes, it just adds up, but the beneficial impact of this is huge. Jyoti ma'am, you want to add something to that?
And I fully agree with that. We have shifted to the first trimester quad test. But having said that, as Piley has already mentioned, I just can't imagine the same thing happening in the medical college setup, where you need to take all these pro forma filled up with blood pressure taken twice from both arms and mean arterial pressure calculated. So it's going to be technically difficult. But instead of putting everybody on universal aspirin, if you can screen them with the history, or if possible uterine artery PA, or if possible blood pressure, whatever you can do, if you just add on to that, it can actually reduce the number need to treat. That's all we can say. I don't think we can just say that, okay, everybody has to have preeclampsia screening, which is not practically feasible here.
Sir, you want to tell
Yes, sir.
something?
Piley sir, you can start.
No, thank you, Sanish and Jyoti. I mean, if it adds only about 2,000 rupees, then it's still worth considering. There may be quite a few takers for that. If it adds only 2,000 rupees to that. Did I understand right? You add only another 2,000 rupees?
No, sir. To the existing double marker test, it adds only another 400 rupees. I mean,
yeah, but the squad test, you give only 2,000, isn't it, altogether?
Yes, sir, from the laboratory side.
That's not really that difficult. Many of the patients, especially in the private setting, may not mind that much. This doesn't ask the cost of this, the ultrasound. No. All together?
Yes, sir.
No, scans.
Okay.
Ultrasound is separate, sir.
Okay, not bad. Thank you.
But most of the people are anyway having NT scan and double marker. So it's just an additional 300 to 400 rupees for that. Cost-wise.
But the impression I got from our lab was that PLGF itself would be very expensive. That is why I asked you.
Not
So
many
PLG
labs are doing it, sir. Only very few labs are doing the test. That is the main concern.
Which one is giving it for you?
Yeah, what
Are
I'm
you doing
using.
it yourself? Are you doing it at your center?
No, we are not
So who is the provider?
PerkinElmer in Chennai is the
Perkin?
provider. Usually sent.
PerkinElmer? Okay.
So the standard laboratories providing the same as of now in India are PerkinElmer, LifeCell, Lilac. These are some of the standard labs which are offering the proper FMF UK based auditable and way of offering
Thank
the
you.
biochemical
Thank you,
test.
Sanish and Jyoti.
Excellent, sir.
And thank you, Kunjumoideen, for
Thank you.
organizing it on this particular day because it's so relevant.
Thank you so much, sir,
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
for your presence, sir.
It's a pleasure to have you on board, sir.
For the utility of all the delegates, I have shared the FIGO guidelines on preeclampsia screening in the chat box from where you can download and go through it. It covers all the important points, and how to screen even in the low resource settings is beautifully covered in this FIGO guideline. So in the chat box, you can, I think, download.
Ma'am,
Any more
just-
questions, Sanjeev?
Yeah. Couple of questions.
We'll
Ma'am,
send
Just few more, around 5 more questions. In previous history of preterm preeclampsia, where screening is not feasible, can we start aspirin directly?
Of course, yes. Previous history is such a high risk factor, and if you don't have screening method, I would strongly recommend starting low dose aspirin.
In a patient with pre-existing hypertension, should we start aspirin at first ANC visit?
It's debatable because just in even aspirin trial, what it has shown is the impact of aspirin on people with chronic hypertension is not as much as the other people. Like the other risk factors are responding very well to aspirin, and chronic hypertension is not something which was acting very well. But having said that, the numbers were not so high to have a proper subgroup analysis. So as of now, I probably would put them on aspirin, but we may not get the expected success. Any comment on that, Sinish?
Yes. So from that forest plot which I had showed of all the risk factors that were present, aspirin had the least beneficial effect on women who had chronic hypertension. Though in women with all kind of hypertension, there was some beneficial effect. So yes, maybe we need to start with 150 milligram because chronic hypertension is a very, of all the risk factors, the most important in leading to development of preeclampsia again.
The next one is, how do we screen for multiple gestation for preeclampsia in first trimester?
The answer is again, some of the bodies recommend straight away putting them on aspirin, but we can do the same uterine artery Doppler, but the accuracy may not be as much as the singleton pregnancy. You can look at the uterine artery Doppler, you can take the history, you can go according to the protocol, but I don't think we have a big randomized trial to support on that.
Your views on using SENG as a screening marker in first trimester?
So
I'm not sure. Endothelial marker, maybe. I don't know. It's a.
Is it SFLT1?
But only S is there, so I'm not sure. The others, I think it's a typing error, probably SFLT. Your views on use, yeah, split as a.
SFLT is mainly used in the second trimester. We haven't had experience with SFLT in the first trimester.
That's it. The questions are covered.
So, ma'am, I think there was some research, publication this year from the FMF UK, where they showed that even with just the double marker test, where PAPE and PLGF was used.
Yeah.
Right? PAPE or beta SCG and PLGF, I think.
PAPE and PLGF.
Yeah, PAPE and PLGF. There was actually a performance which was equal to, for both Down syndrome and preeclampsia, equal to using adding PLGF to the existing markers. Only thing the screen positive rates were higher. So in the future, we might be able to reduce the cost further if this is validated in different clinical settings.
Yeah. And so far, we had a very high regards for the PAPE, and unfortunately, the prediction for PAPE in terms of preeclampsia screening is much less than PLGF. If you look at the numbers, if you just do the screening based on uterine artery PI and mean arterial pressure, it's same as adding on PAPE as well. So we just can't have the normal double marker for preeclampsia screening anymore, unfortunately.
There are a few more questions, sorry. Does tab aspirin started after 20 weeks if patient came with her for her first visit and uterine Doppler PI was high? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, some of the bodies recommend starting from 16 to 28 weeks, so you can, but there are anecdotal reports saying that if you start aspirin later in pregnancy, the incidence of abruption is high, but that is not a big trial or big evidence. But if you ask me, I would rather prefer to put them on aspirin because the chance of having preeclampsia is much higher than having abruption at that point.
I think this is for Dr. Sanish. Is angle correction necessary for uterine artery Doppler in first trimester?
Well, this is my favorite question here. Thanks for asking. So yes, angle correction is important for any Doppler. For any Doppler, angle is very, very important. So just make it a point that whenever you take any Doppler, whether it's the umbilical, the MC or anything, the angle should be less than 20 degrees. All right. And even for the uterine artery, the angle should be less than 20 degrees. And the reason is the wider the angle, the wider you would be from the actual biological value. So suppose the uterine artery PI is actually 1. And if you keep wide angles and if you repeat 3 examinations, you would get 0.7 and 1, 1.4, and even maybe 1.8. So you will get a wide confidence interval. So always keep your angle for any Dopplers less than 30 degree. Okay. And wherever possible, keep it 0 degree. And when you are measuring velocities, you should keep the angle must at 0 degrees.
There's another question on which is better screening marker, PLGF or split bar by PLGF ratio? Which is a better
screening is definitely PLGF because, am I audible?
Yeah, ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah, because PLGF is the one which is going to give you information in the first trimester. Because if you're screening, you should be able to do something. So you wouldn't wait for 20 weeks to do the PLGF split ratio for that. But having said that, if you do the split and PLGF ratio at 20 weeks, it's got a better prediction because you're closer to the incident. So I would put PLGF in the first trimester. The answer is that.
Sorry. Role of aspirin, oligohydramnios, and IUGR.
Once it's established IUGR and oligohydramnios, I don't think it's going to work.
Okay, the previous one was serum endoglin.
Yeah, serum endoglin.
As a screening marker in first trimester.
I think this was used in certain research settings, especially from the research from Fetal Medicine Barcelona and all, but it has not come into clinical application. As of now, only PAPE, beta-SCG, PLGF, alpha-fetoprotein, and other markers are there, and of which the most strongest one for placentation disorder is PLGF.
That completes all the questions.
So, ma'am, like in the last controversial thing that we discussed regarding heparin, so we have seen that many obstetricians are starting heparin. What is your advice for them?
For the pure purpose of prevention of preeclampsia, I wouldn't start them on heparin. If there is an associated previous repeated history of mishaps, recurrent pregnancy loss, or something where you suspect thrombophilias, probably it has got a role. So as of now, we have 2 big trials, EPIP trial and HEPIP trial. Both trials have confirmed that there is no role in doing that. But individual centers have conducted many researches, and all of them have come to a conclusion that it will be helpful. So it's still very, very controversial. So I think you'll have to approach it individually.
And if at all we are starting, I think one needs to use a low molecular weight heparin in the correct dosage.
Absolutely. 40 milligrams subcut.
Thank you, Jyoti ma'am and Dr. Sanish for the wonderful discussion.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Sir is back in the Zoom. So, sir, you are there?
I've been here throughout.
Sir, would like to have your message to the delegates on this day of World Preeclampsia Day. So you can give them message so that it will be useful for them in the coming obstetric practice.
The clear message is we should ensure that every mother is safe, and the objective is to not take anything lightly. When we say low risk, whatever it is, it's all relative, but every mother is safe, especially in the present time. We need to be very, very careful, and whatever we do, we have to do it according to a standard. We cannot take our own whims and fancies cannot be put there. Go according to a standard protocol, and on one side, cost effective, availability, accessibility, and affordability. All these three things must be seen, and what works best for us, which I know for supposing I don't know a particular thing, but I can still do practice because I did not know these things all these years and I'm still practicing. But whatever I practice, I do it absolutely correctly. That itself is a big thing, that instead of adding more and more new things of which I'm not very well trained or very clear about. So always do things only after understanding the protocols very well, and then so that safety is first doing no harm, and that's the most important thing.
So I request Paiti sir, because in the background of CRMD activities on this pre-eclampsia day, would you like to give some message to the obstetricians who are watching this program?
Thank you, Kunju Moideen and Sanish, Jyoti, Suresh, and all of you for highlighting the importance of hypertensive disorders of pregnancy or pre-eclampsia to be on this pre-eclampsia day. As all of you may be aware, in Kerala, this remains the second commonest cause for maternal death. But having said that, hemorrhage takes about 20%, 18-20%. Preeclampsia or hypertension as a whole takes only about 8 to 10% in our state. But if you take the whole of India, especially if you go to the Northeast, in many places, the reports we get is that hypertension is the #1 cause rather than hemorrhage. It may depend a lot on the local circumstances, but I do believe that hypertension is a much bigger problem there than in our state. Maybe because we do have more of antenatal care, we pick up cases early and probably take preventive measures. But whatever it is, as Suresh also said, and all of you said, we have to keep our eyes open because this is an area coming up where new understanding of the pathogenesis is coming up. And if it becomes affordable, at least to start with, centers which can afford should start these things, and then only the rest of the country and with government support, these things will be added to practice. When they do all this in the UK, generally for everybody, there will come a time when our own government will have more input for health, and maybe some of these will come as a common practice. So from that angle, as I told Suresh, we should be exploring the possibility of picking up these patients early and then show that to the community that it is possible to pick them up. So and we should invest in that. So from that angle, this discussion certainly has a lot of benefit to the society at large. And I can only say thank you very much for organizing this and arranging these very useful presentations today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And with these few words, I would like to invite our secretary of Perindalmana NG Society, Dr. Abdul Wahab, to say a few comments because he was working as a professor ONG at MES Medical College for a quite number of years. So your comments and vote of thanks. Over to Dr. Wahab.
Thank you, Kunju Moideen. On behalf of Perindalmana Optical Society, I express my sincere thanks to the faculties who actually Suresh sir, very lucky to have him with us today. And he is rightly a father of fetal medicine in India. Maybe first person who started obstetric ultrasound in India. So it's a right person. It's a living legend. So thanks sir for actively participating and for your wonderful session of screening. And to Dr. Sanish and Dr. Inshi and Dr. Jyoti, thank you all for your wonderful participation and wonderful presentation. And wonderful to have a lot of knowledge. The delegates got a lot of knowledge about the current concept of screening and also the prevention of preeclampsia on this preeclampsia day. And thanks very much to Paiti sir. His input and his comments is always valuable, and he is the backbone of
our confidential review of maternal death in Kerala, and he is actually the right person to have today here, and he is actually having very close relationship with our government authorities and health authorities, and he is very active and very sincerely working for the goal of reducing maternal death in Kerala and also in India. So thank you all once again, and to the delegates and our president, Dr. Kunyumadin, for actively working to participate, conduct this program. Thank you all.
Sincere thanks to LifeCell, who has provided the academic support to this program, and also the Metcon for providing the virtual platform. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you.
Signing off.